Welcome to another episode of the MMA Lock-Cast. I'm your host, Manpreet, aka MMA Lock of the Night, and your boy on Twitter at MMA LOTN. This week we're going to be going over UFC Boston, which is headlined by Dominick Reyes versus Chris Weidman, making his first ever appearance at 205 pounds in the UFC, and co-mained by a fight that was actually the main event a couple weeks ago in Yair Rodriguez and Jeremy Stephens. Fight went like 15 or 20 seconds. Eye poke. We all know the hoopla that happened and the fallout from that. But thankfully, we get to see them actually solve this puzzle a couple weeks later. And I'm super happy that we're actually going to get to see it. We get two less rounds, but if you guys remember my breakdown from the last one, I don't think it's going to go the full distance regardless. So I think I'll be happy with 3 rounds anyway. And a little extra added heat due to the fallout of the eye poke and hotel bullshit and all that stuff that happened. So this week it's a little bit of a weird week. This is the first time the UFC is having fights on a Friday, at least in the most recent memory from what I remember. Plus, I just got back from a mini vacation visiting the fiance's parents in the middle of Canada, buttfuck nowhere. But I still want to get out the content to you guys ASAP. So you guys are getting no video this week. You guys are just getting the plain audio. Wasn't able to make it out to the Big Rob studio this week just due to time restrictions and all that shit. I want to get this out to you guys ASAP. Right now, I'm hoping that I can get out to you guys by Wednesday night at the latest, just so you guys have at least, 36 to 48-ish hours to consume it, and hopefully help you out with any of the best that you decide to make. So obviously there will be no casuals this week. I don't have my man Big Rob. It's just me sitting alone in my own little office area at my place. So the sound may not be the best. I'm just recording it off of one of my fucking Dre Beats headphones. But it should do, and it should suffice, and it should help you guys out regardless. So as we always do, let's go over the last event real quick before we jump on into this UFC Boston card. It was a profitable event for me. Lock of the night play hits, so we'll start off with that. I had 4 units on JJ Aldrich at minus 157. That profits for 2.55 units. Super happy with that win. It looked a little sketchy in that second round, but then JJ Aldrich, just being the forward pressure and the quicker striker fighter in this situation, goes up there and decisively takes that third round. Easy 29-28 all around, in my opinion. And I'm not sure why more people weren't on Aldrich here. I saw a couple people on Lauren Mueller as well. I guess you can. I see the argument for Mueller a little bit. She on paper seems like the better Muay Thai and 8-limb striker. However, with JJ Aldrich, you just get a more feistier woman, a girl that likes to come forward more, the quicker hands, as we clearly saw, and just a better overall game. And I'm happy I took that bet. Clear lock of the night play there. Wish I went the full 5-unit lock of the play. Value as I normally do. However, I just took the 4 units due to the fact that minus 157 is a gift in a line anyway. So, money management. All right, let's move on to my other W that night. I had 1.75 units at minus 113 on James Vick, Nico Price under 1.5 rounds. Should have went deeper on that as well. Profited for 1.55 units. No brainer. Nico Price either fucking gets killed or goes out or gets a incredible knockout just as he did this weekend or this past weekend, or he goes out into his shield. And I think this was the perfect ingredient that you need in a fight against a guy in James Vick, coming up to 170, but still having a questionable chin and sometimes questionable fight IQ. And bang, here we go. Nico Price with an upkick knockout, one of the first ones you've seen in the UFC in a long fucking time. I think the last one that I can remember, it wasn't even in the UFC, but was Gegard Mousasi and Jacare Souza. So big one for Nico Price there. Gets another highlight reel KO on his record, and we profit 1.55 units on that play. Next up, we had 3 losses, minimal losses, which still allowed us to have a profitable event. So I'll go over this real quick. Devin Clark against Ryan Spann. Very weird fight. Ryan Spann coming out there looking like he's just about to go take a jog on a Sunday morning. Not really pushing the pressure much, but once the distance did close, he found Devin Clark's neck and just cranked on that guillotine choke, and Devin Clark taps really fucking quickly. So very unfortunate L there. but it was only one unit. I took also a 0.4 unit stab at plus 342 on Andrew Sanchez. I thought that line was way out of whack. The fight was obviously a little bit closer than a plus 342 would indicate, but I would take that bet 10 out of 10 times. Andrew Sanchez, I still believe he's the better overall fighter, but Marvin Vettori just came out victorious this time around, so it is what it is. And then lastly, I had Kron Gracie, 1.25 units at minus 105 against, I said Kron Gracie inside the distance against Cub Swanson. That play does not come out to fruition. And if I were to bang on myself for any play that I regret the most, it was probably that one. After tape, while talking to a couple friends before really getting into the card and researching it, I had claimed, I'm like, yo, Kron Gracie probably will be lock of the night play, but let me do some investigating first before I make that commitment. Obviously digging into it a little bit more and seeing his lack of ability to efficiently get fights to the ground, I decided to take a smaller play. I thought if it was to ever get into the grappling realm or even to a place where Kron Gracie was going to be able to wrap Cub Swanson up, he'd be able to get him to the floor and somehow sweep or catch some sort of submission. That did not come to fruition. So big shout out to anybody that played Cub Swanson. I saw a couple people on him. Beautiful striking. That's kind of the game plan I was expecting him to implement when I had bet him against Brian Ortega. Ortega fucking wizard with his jiu-jitsu, jumps for the guillotine, switches his grips mid-air and still gets a submission against Cub Swanson. I thought Kron Gracie was going to be able to maybe not pull off a jump to a guillotine and pull off a submission like that, but still somehow, do what he did to Alex Caceres in a sense where he was able to, engage in the clinch, shuck to his back, and then eventually work his submission game from there. However, Cub Swanson did a great job of staying on his bicycle and not allowing Kron Gracie to even face him with any of his jiu-jitsu. So big shout out to Cub Swanson for getting that victory. But at the end of the day, we're up 1.45 units on that event for a 17% ROI. Happy with that one, just to get the W there. So that brings us to our next event, which I already have 4 bets on. Haven't really publicized them yet until I released a podcast. But if you have been, peeping on my Bet MMA tips profile, you'll see the bets that I've already made. So I'll go through them as I go through the card. But if you want to see what they are, you can check out my website check me out on Twitter at MMA Lotn, or check the website MMALOTN.ca, and I'll make sure to give you guys or you guys will definitely see my bets posted there as well. So they're all free, nothing to pay for, nothing like that. So make sure you guys go check that out. And if you want any advice, continue listening to the podcast as always. All right, so let's get some quick thoughts on the event real quick before I get into each individual matchup. UFC Boston, big card, got a couple local Boston guys on there, especially some other intriguing matchups throughout. Brendan Allen finally making his UFC debut after successfully having a fight on the Contender Series. Tanner Boser finally making his UFC debut as well after that debacle at UFC Vancouver where he was supposed to fight, but his opponent was popped by USADA pretty much the morning of the fight, so that kind of sucked for him. Who else we got? UFC debut of Sean Brady, who's been much anticipated in that Northeast U.S. MMA sphere for a little bit now, 10-0. Kyle Bochniak against Sean Woodson, who's another Tuesday Night Contender Series winner. Manny Bermudez, the return of Charles Boston Strong Rosa. Darren Winn coming back against Darren Stewart. Maycee Barber versus Gillian Robertson, which I believe is a very, very intriguing fight. Could possibly be fight of the night in my opinion too. So very stoked for that fight. Joe Lauzon trying to get back on the train after his brutal loss to Chris Grutzmacher, taking on another Contender Series winner in Jonathan Pearce. The return of the War Prince, or whatever the fuck you call him, Greg Hardy against Ben Sosoli. And then obviously Yair Reyes versus Jeremy Stephens, which I talked about at the top of the show. And then Chris Weidman finally making his 205-pound debut, kind of forced to take his 205 debut against a very, very tough fight in Dominick Reyes, who is undefeated at 11-0. So 13 fights, a lot of fights that have intriguing wrinkles to each one. We're supposed to actually get Zabit Magomedsharipov on this card too. However, something happened. I believe it was his weight or an injury or something. But his fight with Calvin Kattar, who was a Bostonian, now has to go over to Moscow, Russia, and fight pretty much in Zabit Magomedsharipov's backyard. So unfortunate for Calvin Kattar there, but at least he still gets the fight that he wants. Maybe not on the home field like he thought he was going to get. So let's get right into this card. Starting at the bottom, we got Daniel Spitz versus Tanner Boser kicking off the fight. Daniel Spitz, very interesting fighter, nicknamed Daddy Longlegs. He stands at 6'7" with an 82-inch reach. Hasn't fully grown into the potential that he could possibly have with the frame that he has and the type of movement that he presents at heavyweight. Last time out, he lost to Walt Harris pretty much at the ending of round 2. That was back in June of 2018. So it's been a little bit of a layoff for him, roughly about a year and 4 months now. He was supposed to fight Jeff Hughes back in March. That fight fizzled, but now here he is against Tanner Boser. I think Spitz presents some intriguing techniques, at least in terms of with his range and his movement. He doesn't really move like a traditional heavyweight. Very lanky, likes to switch stances. Yeah, if you guys notice on his record, he has a 4-second finish in the fight before his UFC fight before his UFC debut against a guy named Colton Vaughn. It seemed like it was like a rush where Colton was trying to blitz Spitz. Blitz Spitz. I can't believe I actually said that 3 times in a row quickly. I don't know if you guys will call that quickly, but try it out. Let me know how it goes. Anyway, Colton tried to blitz Spitz, and it seemed like he rolled his ankle or he hurt his knee or something, and Spitz pretty much mauled him, and the referee quickly stopped it. So that 4-second knockout or finish by punches, I'd take a look at that before being completely being completely blown away by the fact that he has a 4-second finish on his record. Anyway, he comes into the UFC. He's 1-2 with his only finish coming over Anthony Hamilton 24 seconds into the fight. Unlike the Colton Vaughn fight, this was actually a pretty well-deserved finish. 24 seconds, landed beautifully on Anthony Hamilton and put his ass out. But Walt Harris was having none of that. So with Tanner Boser, you're getting a guy that's a little bit more used to going to a decision. Very efficient with his striking. Speaking about decision, besides his last fight against Jared Kilkenny, he had 4 straight fights that went to a decision. Also including a draw that he had at M1 Challenge 101, which was back in March of this year. It's hard to get those fights from Unified, which is actually his last fight. Unified does something with their fucking tapes where they just do not let it out to the public, and they try to resell it and hope that people will actually buy it. I don't know about you guys, but I'm not really looking to put money to see original fights. They should just fucking put them out for free. Just let us dissect it. It's more, I'd say if anything, it's more potential to spread their own name, their own promotion, get their name out there a little bit more, but it is what it is. I'm not going to hate on them too much. So my man, Mr. Honky, actually has a compilation out there of the beautiful leg kicks that Tanner Boser was able to implement throughout his 3.5 round fight against Jared Kilkenny back in May. And yeah, that's pretty much a gist of his striking. He's a very good boxer, likes to use his kicks a lot too, but he doesn't try to throw everything into his shots. He's a very methodical striker. He doesn't look for that knockout punch, or he doesn't try to look to get you guys out of there quickly. He's very methodical, but I'm intrigued to see how he's going to be able to deal with a guy with the length of a Daniel Spitz. So I'm not too confident in Tanner Boser here. I know he's currently sitting around the -120-ish range, -125. If you were to take a shot at this fight at pick'em odds, I would go with Boser, because I think that, with Mr. Daddy Longlegs, he's going to be having a little bit easier of a time trying to beat up the leg of Spitz, and if that's the game plan that he tries to come in with, he might be successful. But Daniel Spitz, I expect him to come in with the game plan, expecting to be leg kicked and try to counter off heavy, heavy straights, heavy hooks. Try to come back with the hands whenever Tanner Boser tries to throw those leg kicks. Um, I'm very skeptical about betting guys that are making their UFC debuts, but it also has to come against a guy that I'm not very high on. I'm not the highest on Daniel Spitz, but he does have some potential. Like again, if he really comes into his groove and is able to actually, implement his style, his movement, his range, he could be a problem for some of these guys at heavyweight. But it's hard for me to see how Tanner Boser doesn't come out there and implement his striking. And kind of put a little bit of a beating on Daniel Spitz. So I'm going to go with Boser here by decision. But even at pick 'em odds or close to pick 'em odds, I just don't feel comfortable betting Tanner Boser either. So I'm picking Boser by decision, but it's a no bet for me. Yeah. All right, next up we have Kevin Holland against another debuting UFC fighter in Brendan Allen. I'll start off with Brendan Allen. He has a win over Aaron Jeffrey last time around. He finished him 3 minutes, 23 seconds into round number 1. He was getting hit with some shots until he was able to finally land a beautiful knee, which dropped Aaron Jeffrey, followed up with a little bit of ground and pound, found his neck, and then eventually went for the rear naked choke and got the tap. In the Moses Morieta fight, he made no bones about it. He wanted to get this fight to the ground ASAP. He beat the fuck out of Morieta. It was kind of awful to see, actually. The fight could have been stopped at any point in the 4th or 5th round. Morieta was just not getting off the ground. He was not able to keep Allen off him. In this fight here, though, with Kevin Holland, he seems like he could be the stronger guy. He might be able to bully Kevin Holland up against the cage. Holland's last fight against Alessio Di Chirico, that was kind of the story. It was a very back and forth fight against the cage. Holland was able to have a little bit more success, but I do believe that Brendan Allen could be the stronger grappler. At least if you put him up against Alessio Di Chirico. So I think it's an intriguing fight for Allen. However, his striking defense is just not the best. It's just not UFC level in my opinion. And I think that with Kevin Holland's unorthodox striking and his lankiness, his kicks as well, I think that he can make it a very tough fight for Brendan Allen. He will have a 4-inch reach advantage. Brendan Allen is only an inch shorter than him, but I think he also packs the heavier power and the heavier strength. Tough fight for me. It's a pass. I just don't feel confident enough in Brendan Allen to actually bet the dog here. Nor do I feel confident in Kevin Holland, not being outgrinded this time around. Thiago Santos was able to outgrind him. He's had some success against John Phillips. It was a very back and forth fight against Gerald Mearshart, who I believe has better jiu-jitsu than Brendan Allen. But I think that Allen is just a stronger guy here, and he could make it a much closer fight than it should be. So, pass for me. I will take Kevin Holland via TKO. I think that he will land on Brendan Allen and eventually finish him probably in the second round. But I just don't feel confident enough to be betting Kevin Holland around the minus 157, minus 160-ish range that he's currently at. So pass for me on betting, but I do like Kevin Holland to win this fight. All right, next up we got Sean Brady against Court McGee. Court McGee coming off a loss to Diego Lima last time out in a fight that I had him as the luck of the night play. That really opened my eyes to Diego Lima, hence why I bet him last time around. He fought. Diego Lima went out there and finished, or put a beating on Luke Jamal pretty much. Took the decision victory there, but Court McGee just wasn't ready for that game plan of Diego Lima, and especially that takedown defense that Lima was able to show. It was a huge improvement that I believe nobody, even Court McGee, wasn't expecting. Hence why I believe he took the L there. Should it have been a split decision? I don't think so. I think unanimously Diego Lima should have gotten that on all 3 judges' scorecards. And now here, Court McGee finds himself against a young, hungry, up-and-coming kid, 10-0, even undefeated on the amateur scene as well, going 4-0. But the one thing that I am questioning is the type of competition that Sean Brady has been facing. Court McGee is a veteran in the UFC. He's been around since 2010 is when he was actually using on the Ultimate Fighter, but he's stuck around for a while. He's had a lot of ups and downs. He's had a lot of tough fights, and I don't think that Sean Brady really brings anything to the table that is going to blow Court McGee out of the water. He is a heavy striker. He looks to get fights to the ground, and Court McGee is a decent grappler himself. Court McGee also has a beautiful gas tank as well, so I think that's going to be an interesting spin on this. It's very, very tough for me to bet a guy in the minus 235, minus 230-ish range who is this massive of a favorite against the UFC tested guys in Court McGee, especially, the minus 235 guy making his UFC debut. Very, very tough. We saw Maki Pitolo kind of drop the ball against Callum Parter a couple weeks ago. Miguel Beza almost dropped the ball as well against Hector Aldana. It's tough, man. You got to really pick and find the spots and the right lines when betting some of these guys that are just making their UFC debuts. No matter if they've been a wrecking scene on the regional circuit, once you get to the UFC, it's a different feel. There's different nerves. It's just tough. I believe the one thing that I think that is good for Sean Brady here is he's going to be fighting close to home. He fights out of Philadelphia, so it's not too far from Boston. So I think he'll have a strong contingent of people coming out to support him. But I think still just walking into that cage, seeing the UFC on the ground and seeing that giant monster logo in the middle of the cage, I think it could catch up to Sean Brady here. So I still will pick Brady to win because I do like his style of fighting and his kind of, relentless forward pressure, winging hooks and beautiful like grappling ability. But would I bet him at the minus 235 range? Probably not. Court McGee is still, he could still get in there. We've seen him fight a guy kind of as the same physique as Sean Brady and Alex Garcia just in October of last year. And obviously Sean Brady has a different game than Alex Garcia, but we know that Court McGee is still around. He could still definitely, put it on some guys. He's only 34, a little bit higher up in the range of age, but, still potentially could be in decent condition in his career. But I am still going to take Sean Brady here. I think he's going to win by decision. I think he'll be able to continuously back up Court McGee with big shots, put him on the ground, probably do some work from on top. But it's going to be tough for me to see how you can confidently bet a heavy favorite like Sean Brady, who's making his UFC debut against the battle-tested Court McGee. So I wouldn't be too mad at seeing people putting Sean Brady in a parlay or something, but to bet him straight is blasphemy in my opinion. So I'll take Sean Brady by decision, but it's a pass for me as a bet. All right, next up, we got Randy Brown versus Boston Salmon. So Randy Brown, what am I talking about? Randy Costa versus Boston Salmon. Last time we saw Randy Costa in the cage, he was fighting Brandon Davis back at UFC 236. Relatively, unfortunate, fight for him, considering he was coming into the UFC 4-0. All of his fights finished within the first minute of the fight. He just comes in with this juggernaut attitude of just trying to take guys' heads off, and he could have some success here against Boston Salmon, who just recently got put out and finished by Khalid Taha. I believe it was on the same card. Yeah, it was on the same card. 25 seconds into the fight, he gets put out. This is a tough fight because stylistically and technically, I believe that Boston Salmon is the better a better fighter, I should say. He's a little bit more crisp with his strikes, but I think that Randy Costa has a strength and power advantage here. Dogger pass for me. Plus 140-ish for Randy Costa currently. You got to question Boston Salmon's chin because it was a bad knockout. It was one of the worst knockouts. Not worse, sorry. One of the more frightening knockouts of 2019. And I think that Randy Costa carries that type of power in his hands, where if he connects on Boston Salmon and Boston Salmon just doesn't have his wits about him still, it could definitely be trouble. So I don't know how you could bet a good sum of money on Boston Salmon with that big question mark out there. But also with Randy Costa, you're talking about a guy who pre-UFC, his combined opponent's record was 5-14, and one of those three of those guys had no wins coming into that fight. So huge question mark in terms of his level of competition. And then when he did fight somebody, somewhat UFC caliber in Brandon Davis, he came out on the losing end. So it's kind of first round of burst for Randy Costa. I believe that if you have the ability to um, lie bet on this fight, I would go with Boston Salmon after the first round. But if it stays in the first round, I think it's going to be very dangerous for Boston Salmon. But I will take I'll take Costa first round finish. I'll take the dog here. I won't be betting it. Would see to win inside the distance. Costa wins inside the distance is plus 325. The under 2.5 is actually minus 120, which is kind of intriguing actually. Kind of a line that I just stumbled on actually as I'm recording this podcast. So that might be something that I look at. Yeah, I'll definitely take a look at that because we don't really know what Randy Costa looks like after the 1.5 round mark. And if you give me under 2.5, it might be something that I'll possibly look at. So yeah, minus 110 ish on the under 2.5. I really like that. Yeah, so I'll take Randy Costa here, first round knockout, and possibly bet the under here. I really like the line, and I think that there's a lot of value there. So, won't be betting Randy Costa, nor will I be betting Boston Salmon, but I might be making a play on the under 2.5 rounds here, which currently minus 120 or so. I'll see what it's at on Pinnacle, as that's usually my main go-to website. So I'll look at that, but I definitely like that. I think anything better than minus 120 is worth at least like a 1.2 to 1.5 unit stab. So I like the under 2.5 here for Randy Costa and Boston Salmon. And I'll take Randy Costa by first round KO. Just not um, confident enough in betting Randy Costa straight. All right, next up we got Kyle Bochniak against Sean Woodson. Intriguing fight here, just due to the fact that Sean Woodson is a tall motherfucker for 145, 6'2", 79-inch reach, coming off a flying knee knockout in the Contender Series back in July, in a fight that he was kind of getting. He was having his success on the feet when when the fight was on the feet, but Terrence McKinney was able to get the fight to the ground on numerous occasions, pretty much ride out the first round on Sean Woodson's back. Almost the same story in the second round until Sean Woodson was able to, clear the body triangle, get the fight back to the feet, and literally the first strike that he throws is a flying knee, and he gets the finish over Terrence McKinney. So not a good look if you kind of watch the fight in total, but impressive knockout. His first finish in 4 fights. I'll take it. Good one for him there. But Kyle Bochniak, he's a guy that likes to kind of crash forward, just like his nickname says. He's a forward pressured fighter. Even in the Hakeem Dawodu fight, he was getting hit a lot, but was still moving forward. He has a great chin, hasn't been finished, so that he has that kind of to his advantage. Great durability. I think he might be able to walk forward and kind of wear on Sean Woodson here. Woodson has a very stinging jab, very precise with his with keeping range and keeping fighters on the outside. But I think that Kyle Bochniak will be able to eat some of those shots and kind of close the distance. I'm not knocking anybody for really taking a shot at Sean Woodson at dog money, but I think that this is kind of a fight for Kyle Bochniak to go out there and win in front of his home crowd. Don't feel comfortable betting him at the minus 140 range because I think that Sean Woodson does have some. He definitely has some skill. He's 6-0, great striking. Takedown defense leaves a little bit to be desired. He did show some great takedown defense in roughly that first minute or so against McKinney, but the McKinney was able to finally get the fight to the ground. That's not really Kyle Bochniak's game, but I do believe that Bochniak can make this fight a little bit of a grind and kind of wear on Sean Woodson. So as long as Bochniak's chin holds up, I think that he can come away with a decision victory here. He had a little bit of a similar fight against Brandon Davis, and another guy who's kind of lanky for that for that fight. For that division. But Woodson's a little bit bigger. I think he's a little bit better of a striker than Brandon Davis too. But I still like Bochniak to win this fight by decision. Pretty much just grinding Sean Woodson against the cage, trying to get this fight to the ground and keep this in a range where, or keep this in a distance where Sean Woodson won't be able to implement his range and keep him on the outside. So pick is going to be Kyle Bochniak, but will not be betting that fight. Next up, we got Molly McCann versus Diana Belbita. Oof, this one was a tough one to watch tape for. Diana Belbita in her second last fight against Belena Bojic, 17-second finish via punches, but that fight was horrible. Three of her last four opponents were making their MMA debuts. And then her, that last fight out of those four was actually a rematch against the girl that she had beaten, who had only managed to get one more victory and then lost one more time and then got this rematch against Diana. But goddamn, it's I think the one thing that it comes down to for Diana is that she was able to be a little bit more aggressive and had a little bit more on the gas pedal than her opponents, which is why she was able to win these fights. But she just does not have the best technique. She's kind of just a wing and move forward and try to out aggressive her opposition. I should say, the type of performance that Anna Maria Powell was able to put on, um, you know, having the success that she had, staying in the fight as much as she did, getting the fight to the ground as easily as she did. I think that it's going to be a tough time for Diana Belbita to get a victory in the UFC, especially against a girl like Molly McCann. Molly is. I've kind of shit on her in the past, but she's a decent fighter considering the rest of the division. The way that she was able to outbox and outpressure Ariane Lipski, even keeping this fight in the striking realm, which is where Ariane Lipski was supposed to have the most success. Molly McCann was able to, put her hands together, land big shots, and then eventually get the takedown in the last, in the dying seconds of each round. I think that she'll have success taking the fight to the ground if she need to against Belbita. I think in the first round she might have to, but after that, I think that she might be able to kind of outstrike Diana, who I believe will be sucking a little wind after that first round against Molly McCann. So I don't, as bad as Diana Belbita looks on tape, I do not think that Molly McCann is worth parlaying at -600. Fuck out of here if you guys even believe that's something worth doing. Um, I just don't like this fight for Deanna. I'm not the biggest on Molly McCann either. Again, I've kind of shit on her in the past, but this is not a fight where you should be parlaying -600 Molly McCann, no matter how bad fucking Deanna Belbita looks. So I'm taking Molly McCann by decision, but I'd be worried about betting her. You know what? I'm actually going to take Molly McCann by third round TKO, just due to how bad Deanna Belbita actually looks. Um, but yeah, do not, please, for your well-being and for my sake, do not parlay Molly McCann at -600. -300, maybe. -600, fuck no. Simple as that. All right, next up, we got Manny Bermudez versus Charles Rosa. So this is a fight that I actually have a bet on. I do have 1.5 units on 1.5 units at +130 on Manny Bermudez to win inside the distance. There's no bones about it. With Manny Bermudez, you're getting a guy that's pretty much just winning inside the distance. He's always looking to get the fight to the ground, albeit to his detriment. But when he gets the fight to the ground, more often than not, he's finding some sort of choke. His UFC debut against Albert Morales, he was able to get the fight to the ground finally in the second round and got that guillotine choke relatively quickly. David Grant only took him 1 minute to get that choke, the triangle choke. And then with Benito Lopez, was able to find that neck and get that guillotine choke 3 minutes and 9 seconds into that first round. The Casey Kenny fight is a little bit of an anomaly. This is the first time he fought a guy that probably has better scrambling ability. than Manny Bermudez, and a better awareness of trying to stay a step ahead of his opponents. And Casey Kenny's really good at that. You can't really knock Kenny for that. I think that Kenny's gonna have some success in the UFC, but I think that he had Bermudez's number that night. But I think that this is a much more favorable matchup for Bermudez coming in against Charles Rosa. Switching over to Charles Rosa, 11-3, trains at American Top Team, but his nickname is Boston Strong. The guy is from the Massachusetts area. He hasn't fought since April of 2017, where Shane Burgos TKO'd him with 2 minutes into the third round, way back at UFC 210. That was Daniel Cormier versus Anthony Johnson 2. That was a long time ago. He was scheduled to come back against Mizuto Hirota back in September of 2017. That fizzled. And then he was also supposed to fight Dan Ige in January of 2018. That fizzled. And now here he is back nearly 2.5 years after he last fought against Manny Bermudez. So yeah, he does have the home field advantage, uh, you know, but to fight a guy with the style of Manny Bermudez, this is probably a tough fight to come back to. Um, Manny Bermudez he has a decent chin. He is undefeated. He has never been finished. And his style of just moving forward. And I think that Charles Rosa's, weird style of, fighting sideways and kicking a lot and throwing spinning shit. I think it's going to come to bite him in the ass against Manny Bermudez here. He needs to mind his P's and Q's on the feet, because if you throw anything out there without bringing it back quick enough, Manny Bermudez is going to get a hold of it. He's going to take you down, and he's going to start working for the submission. Um, I do not think at all Charles Rosa wants to fuck around on the feet here. I think that Manny Bermudez has the advantage no matter what. And he showed decent striking against Casey Kennedy. Not the absolute worst, but he does have some improvements to make there. But I think that it's really going to come down to Charles Rosa, making sure that he gets his kicks back, because I think that Manny Bermudez is kind of going to anticipate Charles Rosa's kicks. He's going to grab onto one of those kicks if Rosa is even the slightest bit lazy with it, and he'll be able to get the takedown. Um, and start working his jiu-jitsu. So that's kind of what I'm banging on. I don't really see Manny Bermudez winning a decision here, because just due to his constant forward pressure, constant knack for looking for the finish. So I think it's either Manny Bermudez gets the finish, or Charles Rosa somehow, some way keeps this fight on the feet and picks apart Manny Bermudez. But I just don't see that happening, especially 2.5 years away from the cage. You gotta really be on top of your reaction time, especially against a guy with the finishing ability and knack for finding that finish like a Manny Bermudez. So I don't like this matchup for Charles Rosa to come back to, and I think that we're going to see Manny Bermudez, actually another Massachusetts native from Rockland, Massachusetts. And where is Rosa's fighting out of Boynton Beach, Florida, but he was born in Peabody, Massachusetts. So this is two Massachusetts boys going at it. But I do like Manny Bermudez here to get the finish. And I think that there's a lot of value at him at plus 130 to win inside the distance. So I think it would be kind of stupid for anybody to play Manny Bermudez straight, when I think that his clear path to victory is to win inside the distance. And for people that don't have the ability to bet guys to win inside the distance, minus 145-ish, not too bad of a range for Bermudez. I wouldn't bet him over like minus 160, minus 170, but I do love the underdog value that you can get for him to win inside the distance. The under 2.5 is roughly around minus 120, so I think that even betting the under 2.5 would probably be the better way to go if you want to bet Manny Bermudez, rather than taking slightly more juice by betting Manny Bermudez at minus 142 or minus 145. So my tip to you, if you don't have the ability to bet Manny Bermudez inside the distance, I would bet the under 2.5, because you'll get better value, and I think that's the way that Manny Bermudez will win, which is inside the distance. All right, next up, Darren Winn against Darren Stewart. We got Deron Winn against Darren Stewart, almost the same name, so I don't want to completely fuck it up. Deron Winn 6-0. I'd like to call him the middleweight midget, because the guy is 5'5", 71-inch reach, but looks like he's always fighting the biggest of big men anytime he goes in there. Great wrestling pedigree, comes from AKA. A lot of people call him mini DC, but we didn't see any of that DC in his last fight against Eric Spicely. Very fun fight of the night, if I'm not mistaken. That was back in June. But he was supposed to fight Marcus Perez and Bruno Silva back in June, but then Eric Spicely stepped up on short notice. And even before that, he had a fight against Tom Lawler on the Liddell versus Ortiz 3 card. I was surprised that he didn't attack his wrestling game a little bit more with Eric Spicely, even though Spicely is a really good jiu-jitsu practitioner. He was over 3 on his takedown attempts against Spicely. That fight was way closer than it should be, especially if you potentially parlayed Deron Winn in that minus 285, minus 300 range. You were probably sweating your balls throughout that entire fight. He still comes out on the winning side, but in this fight against Darren Stewart, I think he needs to rely on that grappling a little bit more. So Darren Stewart has shown some improvements in his takedown defense. That Eric Spicely fight, I believe I had Spicely in that, and it was a very rude awakening when Stewart was able to keep the fight on the feet. He did get taken down 8 times by Edmund Shabazian, but Shabazian just was not able to keep him down. I'm interested to see whether Deron Winn, if he could get him down, and if he'll be able to keep him on the ground. But Stewart did beat Bevan Lewis in his last fight. I did see many instances where Bevan Lewis was able to control Darren Stewart against the cage, but whenever there was a break, Darren Stewart was able to land the more significant strikes, and it had more of an effect on the judges. So I believe the cage control that Bevan Lewis was accruing just wasn't having as much of an effect on the judges as Darren Stewart's strikes and significant strikes were actually having. That factor alone, the fact that Darren Stewart has been, kind of held against the cage and show that he can be grinded on, kind of makes me shy to bet on him with Darren Stewart here. The line is relatively close right now. At Sportbook, it's pretty much a pick 'em. At 5 dimes, it's minus 125 for Deron Winn, plus 105 for Darren Stewart. A lot of question marks here. We don't know if we're going to get a Deron Winn that tries to go in there with the Eric Spicely game plan. He would be absolutely stupid if he did. Trying to strike with the dentist. I believe that he is somewhat of a smart guy, and I believe he has a great camp behind him as well. So I don't think we'll see him striking as much as we saw him against Eric Spicely. I think we should see him going for takedowns. I think he'll be successful with takedowns here, but just the size discrepancy and the amount of rage he gives up, and it's just and the amount of power that Darren Stewart has, because we did see Eric Spicely land a couple good shots on Winn and actually stumble him and rock him a bit, and I think that if it was Stewart being able to land those shots, Winn would be in a lot more trouble. So the fight is closely lined, as I truly believe it should be. But I think it truly comes down to the style of fight that Deron Winn brings into this fight. I believe he could easily cage fuck Darren Stewart here, but I'm just not confident enough in actually betting him here either. So I like Deron Winn to win this fight by decision, but I'm just not confident enough in actually betting him in this spot either. All right, next up, we got Maycee Barber versus Gillian Robertson. As I said at the top of the show, I believe this fight could be fight of the night. Gillian Robertson has that constant forward pressure, always looking for takedowns and always kind of seeking the finish, almost Manny Bermudez style. But I think that she has some work to do with her striking. Pretty much all of her wins have come from initiating the grappling. It does take roughly about a round and a half for her to finally get her shit together. But I think that she has her work cut out here against Maycee Barber. Maycee Barber has decent distance management, some good footwork, and she packs a lot of power. She was able to finish JJ Aldrich in the second round in her last fight back in March, especially in a fight where she was kind of getting, she was kind of getting wrecked in that first round. JJ Aldrich landed a lot of good shots. She was able to, accrue a lot of damage in that first round. But then Maycee Barber was able to turn the tables in that second round, land a big knee, and then eventually finished the fight with punches. She had a war against Hannah Cifers as well back in November of 2018. She's a tough girl. She's still young. She's 7-0 now, coming in against Gillian Robertson, who's a little bit more battle tested, at least in the UFC, that is. But it's very tough for me to pick a side here. I am leaning towards Maycee Barber, but I wouldn't look to bet her at all until at least she's in like the pick'em range, the -150 and -120. I think those days are long gone. I don't know if we'll get that. Barber to win inside the distance is currently Barber inside distance is +155. So I don't think that's a bad stab if that's something that you guys want to look at. But it's tough for me to see how Gillian Robertson gets stuff going on the feet. I think she could have some success with the wrestling, but I think that Maycee Barber is very much attested with the ground game as well, and I think that she'll be able to stay out of submissions. But Gillian Robertson, just like her nickname kind of insinuates, she is a savage. She likes to go forward. She likes to put the pressure on you, and she likes to go for the finish. I've been having a lot of success with betting her fights. Don't go to a decision. It's at the -215 range. The under 1.5 is +125. I was kind of hoping to get the under 2.5 here. However, it doesn't look like the bookmakers are going to be sticking in their ways and continuing to line Gillian Robertson fights at over under 2.5. So I like Maycee Barber here. I think she's going to have some fun on the feet, and then she'll finally land a significant of a shot to put Gillian Robertson on her butt, and I think that she'll get the TKO victory here. I would look to bet Maycee Barber if she reaches the -120, -115-ish range, but I'm not 100% sure that we'll see that line with a couple days left until the event. So I'm taking Maycee Barber to win by TKO, but it's very tough for me to pick against my girl Gillian Robertson, as she's made me a lot of money in the past. But I think this is a very tough fight for her, and I'm taking Maycee Barber by finish. All right, we got 4 fights left, so let's roll on through. We got Joe Lauzon against Jonathan Pearce next. This is another fight that I have a bet on. So I got 1 point. Let me make sure I got this right. I got 1.1 units at -110 for Jonathan Pearce to win inside the distance. Let's start off with Joe Lauzon first, though. He's riding a 3-fight losing streak, as well as pretty much trading wins and losses over the past several years. Not really putting much of a record together, or at least a string of wins. He's never won more than 2 straight UFC fights, which is actually a stat that I put out there a couple of weeks ago when I was initially kind of just scatting over this event. Last time around, Joe Lauzon just did not look good. He had somewhat of a success in the first minute and a half, 2 minutes of his fight against Chris Grutzbacher, but after that he started to blow wind pretty quickly, and as we saw, he normally starts to really show his lack of gas tank after that 1.5 round mark. Chris Grutzbacher stayed very composed. Ate some shots from Joe Lauzon, even though they weren't the most, what can I say, technical strikes. But Joe Lauzon, blew his wad in that first 2 minutes, and then Chris Grutzbacher just took over from there, just landing beautiful body strikes, sucking it out of Joe Lauzon, and then eventually, getting or forcing Joe Lauzon's corner to call the fight after the second round. I think Jonathan Pearce is going to have somewhat of a similar success. It's going to come down to that first, minute and a half, 2 minutes. Is Jonathan Pearce going to be able to withstand the power, not the power, but the onslaught of a Joe Lauzon who's going to want to try to get this fight to the ground ASAP. But I like Jonathan Pearce's ability to maintain range. He needs to make sure that he keeps his kicks just like Charles Rosa. And I believe he'll be able to because I think he is faster than Joe Lauzon here. Just get his kicks back whenever he throws them out. Just so Joe Lauzon is able to hold on to them and take him down. But I like Jonathan Pearce to kind of pick apart Joe Lauzon here and then eventually look for the finish, end of second round, early third round. I think that he'll be able to have a lot of success after that first round, which is why, I've seen a lot of people online saying that if you have access to live betting, Jonathan Pearce after the first round is definitely a good bet. But I'm not much of a live bettor myself. Maybe it's something that I should look to get into a little bit more. However, I do like Jonathan Pearce here, regardless. And I did like the minus 110 line of him to win inside the distance. It's a much better price than the minus 150ish, which he's currently at as a straight bet. But I think that Joe Lauzon's best days are behind him. I think he's kind of just coming into this fight because it's in his native state. But it's kind of a bad look. He hasn't fought since April of last year. Really not sure why he really wants to come back, other than the fact that this fight is in Boston. But I love Jonathan Pearce in this part or in this fight, and I kind of said it earlier in the show. You really got to be careful with some of these guys coming off the Contender Series and not really drinking the Kool-Aid. The Maki Patolo thing. That I'm still always going to bring that up. There's a lot of guys coming from the Contender Series that look like absolute killers and look like they're really high level UFC guys, but you got to be very particular about which spots you're choosing them in. And I like this position with Jonathan Pearce and Joe Lauzon. Joe Lauzon is clearly on the way out, just does not know how to manage his gas tank the best. And I think that he's going to be outgunned here by Jonathan Pearce, who's a great striker and decent takedown defense as well, too. So I think that even if Joe Lauzon tries to get a hold of him, I think that Pearce is going to find his way out. But that's all within the first 2 minutes. If Joe Lauzon is able to pull this victory out, under half a round, or sorry, over half a round, I'd be very much surprised. But I'm going to take Jonathan Pearce. I do have a 1.1 unit bet on him at minus 110 to profit for 1 unit. I am going light just due to that Contender Series asterisk that he has beside his name, and also UFC debut, and also fighting, in Joe Lauzon country. But I like the corner that Jonathan Pearce has with the MMA Lab, and I think that he'll be able to maintain his composure, pick apart Joe Lauzon, withstand that initial onslaught, and then eventually get to finish late second round, early third round. So I like JSP, Jonathan Pearce, via TKO. All right. That brings us to my lock of the night play, which is as straightforward as it gets. Why this is under minus 200, I don't know. It might not be under minus 200 come fight time, or at least come fight time. So if you're able to put down this bet as soon as you hear this podcast or even see this bet on my Twitter page or my website, I would make it ASAP. I got 5 units on under 1.5 rounds on Greg Hardy versus Ben Sosoli. It's currently sitting at minus 172 on Pinnacle, which is where I got it. But on other sites, it's in the minus 175-ish range. Let me look at that. Yeah, minus 170-ish range. So you can still get a really good price on it. Let's not be stupid. We know what the fuck Greg Hardy is all about. He's only had one fight ever reach the second round, and then it ended up being that illegal knee against Alan Crowder. But we know what he is about. He wants to go in there, take your hat off ASAP, make a statement, make a roar, have his little fucking moment, and then move on to the next can-crushing fight. Ben Sosoli, how he was the first overall pick in the fucking Ultimate Fighter series, I have no idea. But Juan Espino comes out there, who I think that, Juan Espino, I think he could have a lot of success at heavyweight with his grappling alone. It's unfortunate that we haven't been able to see him compete pretty much since the Ultimate Fighter, just dealing with nagging injuries. But with Ben Sosoli, he's trying to go out there and get a finish. He throws heat just like Greg Hardy throws heat. So why this fight is lined at minus 170, I have no fucking clue. I think that odds makers are just looking at the fact that, Ben Sosoli went the distance with Juan Espino, His fight against Mike Turner went to the third round, but these guys are not Greg Hardy. Greg Hardy's coming out there with full force. He's trying to land big shots, and that kind of leaves himself open too. So I think that if Ben Sosoli is a little bit, patient with the striking, he could catch Greg Hardy on the counter and probably put Greg Hardy on his butt and get the finish that way too. So I would not, I repeat, I would not parlay or look to bet Greg Hardy straight. I would much rather play the under 1.5. If Greg Hardy's going to win this fight, it's under 1.5 rounds. If it gets past that, I think this fight is all Ben Sosoli. But even with that, I do not believe for the life of me that this fight is going to get past the 1.5 minute mark. So under 1.5 at minus 170, at 5 dimes is a gift. I got it at minus 172 at Pinnacle. Fucking lock for the night. Shit, that. I went 5 units deep, the full lock for the night allotment that I normally do. And Greg Hardy, I believe Greg Hardy will be the one to get the finish, sub 2 minutes. Not saying submission 2 minutes, but less than 2 minutes. I think that Greg Hardy will find Ben Sosoli's chin much quicker, much faster, covers the distance a lot better, and just has power for days. So I don't think Sosoli will be the guy to, put a halt to Greg Hardy's, run in the UFC. And it's crazy that this guy's getting his 1, 2, 3, fourth fight. He might even be able to fight one more time if he gets a quick finish. Probably put him on that year-end card. But I think a big win for Greg Hardy here once again. And I love the minus 172 that I'm getting under 1.5 on this fight. So that's my lock of the night play. Greg Hardy is the pick, first round finish, but lock of the night play under 1.5 rounds. Hit that shit ASAP. All right, co-main event, the fight that a lot of people have been waiting for. I wish that we had it settled a couple weeks ago in Mexico City. Unfortunately, we get it pushed back a couple weeks, and here we have it, minus 2 rounds. We got a 3-rounder between Jeremy Stephens and Yair Rodriguez. First time around, I picked Jeremy Stephens, and I believe I bet 3 or 3.5 units, in the minus 105-ish range, minus 110 range. I can't really remember. But this time around, I got that plus money I was waiting for. I got plus 102 on Jeremy Stephens. I put 2.75 units on him this time around. Um, you know, I believe I did take a small poke at him inside the distance in that 5-rounder, but in this 3-rounder, I'll give Yair a little bit of the benefit of the doubt. I do like the plus 230ish that you could possibly get with Jeremy Stephens inside the distance, so I wouldn't be mad at anybody taking a small poke at that. But even to get Jeremy Stephens at plus money is more than enough, I believe. You know, if you guys really want to hear me get super into it, just go back and listen to the UFC Mexico City card. I think a lot of it still pertains, or a lot of it is still relevant in this fight. The only thing that we have to, kind of change up is the fact that we're getting 2 less rounds. I think that opens up Jeremy Stephens' game a little bit more. I think that's going to allow him to be a little bit more, allow him to put his foot on the gas a little bit more, allow him to push the pressure a little bit more. And I think that's going to break Yair Rodriguez even earlier. I think that, Jeremy Stephens has a decent chin. When's the last time that he's been put out? Jose Aldo had that beautiful body kick or body punch that eventually had the ground and pound finish. But before that, Eve Edwards way back in 2012. So I'm kind of banking on Jeremy Stephens' chin here. I think he is going to have to eat a couple shots from Yair Rodriguez, but he's not going to be getting the hardest or the most powerful strikes with Yair Rodriguez moving backwards, which is what I believe Jeremy Stephens will force him to do in this fight. I truly think that Jeremy Stephens will land on Yair Rodriguez because we've seen him, not have the best, at least movement in terms of striking defense, nor does he have the best ability to keep his hands up and block any type of strikes. I said it on the last time I broke down this podcast, but I saw a lot of people initially comparing Yair Rodriguez to Zabit Magomedsharipov, but Zabit just has much better footwork, much better striking defense, and he does a lot better of a job, circling off the cage and getting back to the center of the octagon. I don't see that so much from Yair Rodriguez. I kind of see him, back up, and even when he does kind of try to, try to evade shots. He keeps his feet planted, and he kind of just moves his upper body. But I think that Jeremy Stevens can see that in his game, and especially having guys like Dominick Cruz in his camp, I believe that he is smart enough to be able to step forward a little bit, kind of like the Anderson Silva Chris Weidman thing, where if the guy if he's not using his footwork to evade these strikes, just fucking step forward a little bit, and you'll be able to land that big shot and find their chin, even if the defending fighter believes that they're out of the way. I like Jeremy Stevens here. I think that he'll be able to put that pressure on Yair, not let Yair get comfortable. And I think that Jeremy Stevens will find the knockout here. I'm going to say second round for this time around. I think I said third round last time around, but I'm going to say second time this time, just due to the fact that I think that Jeremy will be able to put his foot on the gas a little bit earlier, not having to worry about going in an extra 10 minutes if he's not able to actually put Yair out. But I will take Jeremy Stevens' second round finish. And let's not forget, there's a lot of heat behind Jeremy Stevens now as well. And I think Yair will fight it with a little bit of emotion too. And even after that fight, we saw that he's not the best at kind of controlling his emotions. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Jeremy Stevens go out there and try some mental warfare as well to kind of put Yair Rodriguez in vulnerable positions. I think that Jeremy Stevens is a killer, and we're going to definitely see that this weekend against Yair Rodriguez. So I'm taking Jeremy Stevens second round TKO. Wouldn't be mad at anybody poking the plus 230-ish range that he is to win inside the distance, but I went straight with the plus 102, my dog of the night play right there. If you're able to get him at dog money, I would highly suggest it. So I'm taking Jeremy Stevens second round TKO. All right, that brings us right to our main event, where we have Chris Weidman making his 205 pound debut against Dominick Reyes. Reyes currently around the minus 170-ish range, where you're getting Chris Weidman around the plus 140, plus 150 range. Like I said at the top of the show, Chris Weidman was kind of forced to move up in weight here. He was forced due to, constant finishes, being finished by Luke Rockhold, being finished by Yoel Romero, Gegard Mousasi. He was able to overpower Kelvin Gastelum after, having a rough first 2 rounds, and then eventually getting that arm triangle choke in the third. And then, down with Jacare Souza, a lot of people was thinking that he was winning that fight until he got finished. You could make an easy argument for that fight being 1-1 going into that third round, and then eventually Jacare Souza gets that finish. Another hometown loss for Chris Weidman, unfortunately. But he's hoping to find new life at 205. Earlier this week, he said that he only has about 6 pounds to cut, which could be, good news or bad news. That could help with his, the water in his brain. That could help with just how he feels overall. But that could also be unfortunate for him because he's fighting a very big light heavyweight in Dominick Reyes. Dominick Reyes, 6'4", 77-inch reach. It looks like he cuts a decent amount of weight to get to that threshold, but it's not like he's killing himself to make it either. He's a young kid, 29 years old, at least young in the game, 11 fights in, had a split decision victory over Volkan Ozdemir in a fight that could have gone either way. A lot of people were kind of thinking that Volkan could have won that fight too, but I don't feel confident in betting Dominick Reyes here. He's in the minus 170-ish range, not where I kind of would want to bet him. If he was closer to like the minus 120-ish range, maybe I would throw a little bit on him just due to the power that he has in his hands. His strength could definitely play an advantage here against a Chris Weidman who's going to look to wrestle here. If Weidman doesn't try to go for a takedown within the first 2 minutes of this fight, I think that he'd have a very flawed game plan. I think Weidman has the advantage with the wrestling, and also I think he has the advantage with the jiu-jitsu, but it's all going to be about if he's able to keep Dominick Reyes down, get him down and keep him down, which I think he's going to have a lot of trouble with, only being around that 210 to 12-ish range that he'll probably be at when he actually fights. I think that Dominick Reyes is probably going to be walking around the 220-ish, 230-ish range, or maybe even 225. And as well, just being as lanky as he is, he's going to be a little bit harder to take down. I think that Dominick Reyes does decent damage in the clinch, and I think that Weidman's going to have to look out for his elbows once he does get into that clinch position, especially against the cage. I think that we will see Weidman be successful with a couple of takedowns, but I just don't know if we will see him be able to keep Reyes down. A lot of people were counting Chris Weidman out against Kelvin Gastelum, who in himself is a heavy hitter as well. And even Weidman, even though Weidman was coming off of 3 devastating knockouts, Kelvin Gastelum wasn't really able to pull him out or put him out and get that final victory. And then eventually we saw Jacare come back and finish him as well too. So tough fight, in my opinion. Not confident in either side to bet them. Obviously, Chris Weidman with his chin issues and the amount of power that Dominick Reyes, keeps in his hand and feet is always a concern. But the grappling is a concern. When Chris Weidman gets Dominick Reyes down, is he going to be able to keep him there? I just don't know. If you are looking to bet this fight at all, what's the over under? Over under is currently set at 1.5. I like the over 1.5 at -155, or even better. I still don't know if I would bet it. I gotta see what Pinnacle has it at. But Best Fight Odds for some reason doesn't show their over unders for Pinnacle. But yeah, I would go with the over here. If you get the over in the -130ish range, I wouldn't be mad at that. I'm kind of envisioning that Weidman's going to be kind of clinch fucking here and trying to keep this fight as close as possible, try to implement his grappling, and I think that's going to kind of throw Dominick Reyes' game off a little bit, kind of get him to try to adjust to it over the first round and a half, and then after that, I think we'll see Reyes kind of open up a little bit more. I do like the over. I don't know if I'll bet it, since I already have 4 bets on the current card. Yeah, I'm going to take Reyes by finish. I'm going to take him late second round to win by TKO. It's just tough for me to see Chris Weidman's chin be able to hold up against heavy hitters like guys like Dominick Reyes. Unfortunate for him. But I do I love Dominick Reyes here, but it's tough for me to bet him at the current odds that he's at. So I'll take Dominick Reyes second round TKO. Unfortunate for Chris Weidman because who knows what the fuck he'll be able to do after that. Maybe he goes back to 185. Maybe he goes to Bellator. Who the fuck knows? But it's kind of unfortunate that he's been forced to move up to 205 because he has no real other options at 185 after taking multiple losses to the top 5 guys there. But I do like Dominick Reyes to win here by TKO. Just not confident enough to bet it. Nor do I think anybody should. If if you're forced to bet him over the -180ish range. So that's pretty much it for UFC Boston. Like I said, I have 4 current bets. I'll quickly go over them for you guys right now. I got 2.75 units at +102 on Jeremy Stephens. I got 1.5 units at +130 for Manny Bermudez to win inside the distance. I have 1.1 units at -110 on Jonathan Pearce to win inside the distance over Joe Lauzon. And lastly, my lock of the night play, I got 5 units at -172 on the under 1.5 for Greg Hardy and Ben Sosoli. That's pretty much a wrap for the Lock-Cast this week. Everything you guys need to know at MMA LOTN on Twitter. That's how you can get a hold of me. You guys can DM me. You guys can fucking hit me up on there. I'm always available to talk to. And then my picks will always be in my pinned tweet, as well as on the website at www.mmalotn.ca. Make sure you guys check that shit out. It's all free for now, or kind of always has been. And I will be back next week to cover what event do we have? I believe it's the Singapore card. The Singapore card, headlined by Damian Maia and Ben Askren, which should be a very fun grappling contest. I see that the odds are currently out as well, so I'll definitely be looking over that after I wrap up this podcast and see if I can find any spots for myself. So, like I said, at MMA LOTN on Twitter, and the website is mmalotn.ca. That's it. I'm done. I'm out. Thanks for listening. Oh yeah, like and subscribe as well. All right, I'm done. Later.